Hello, my name is Jamie Tomey, and I am more than pleased to welcome you to the Evanston Bound series, An Artist Talk and Quarantine, brought to you by Artist Bookhouse. When the coronavirus hit and made it impossible for us to visit book artists and talk with book artists and letterpress printers and paper makers and writers, we decided to bring them to you virtually via our Zoom quarantines. Our third session is with Alice George, Evanston-based poet and visual artist. We visited her in her studio on Florence. We hope you enjoy. Hi, Alice.
Hey, so this is my amazing studio on the block of 1100 block of Florence. I'm walking in. Here's Ben Blount's studio. There's Ben.
Hi, Ben.
And I share the studio with Beth Adler. And this is her amazing printing press. This is her work on the wall. And she happens to be a wonderful book artist too.
Ooh.
There's some of her books.
Oh, very cool.
And I'm going to lead you through a lot of my book images, but I laid out a couple of things. I laid out some of my big books. I do great big stuff on watercolor paper. This is where it started. That's my book of poetry, back when I was a poet. This is a book every book artist knows that I've used amazingly a lot whenever I forget how to do a stitch. This is a book on solitude, which I'm returning to a lot right now. You can see that I do a lot of drawing, multimedia, collage.
Okay, hold
painting.
on. Alice, can I interrupt you for a second? If you wouldn't mind going a little slower when you show us your project, because there's a little bit of a lag. Apparently, this is from the from our comments, so we're getting a little bit of a lag on the Zoom. So maybe focus on the solitude book and just take it slower, a little bit slower, please. Thank you.
So here's, I'll just walk us through one book and then I'll go to the computer, will be easier. Okay. This is a book I did, and this is, I do a lot of different ways of doing text, everything from stenciling to letraset. I love doorways and architectural features. I quote other people quite a bit. This is Rilke. I am too much alone in the world, yet not alone enough. Which seems relevant.
Yeah.
A doorway from Venice. And then I started ruminating about everyone from my father, who I've been thinking about a lot lately. I'm kind of fascinated with chandeliers. So that's a chandelier image. I'm also fascinated with hands. And I persist on doing self-portraits, which make me either look deranged or mystical. And here's another house. That's right, where I took collage language and did that.
Nice.
So
that's lovely.
Yeah.
All right. So if you yeah, go ahead and sit down at your desktop if you're ready to. Yeah, and then we can unmute your phone one. Oh, you logged out. Okay, now unmute your, there we go. Okay, so then.
Okay.
All right.
So here I am back here.
Right.
So.
Okay, so Alice, your phone. We need to log out of your phone.
My phone's gone. It should be.
Okay, because there was a little feedback on the phone one. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Alice George, an Evanston-based poet visual artist and now bookmaker, and very interested in a lot of different things as far as coming into the book. So Alice, would you sort of talk to everyone about how your process from language being sort of like written language to visual language, and then how you sort of brought that all together? What inspired you to bring it all together and start working with books?
Okay, happy to. But I realized I forgot to close the door.
Ben, close her door. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Alice. Yes, welcome.
Jamie, did you talk about sketchnoting?
No, yes. Do that process first so that people can join in.
Okay. So I have been teaching and doing graphic note-taking for a while, and I adore it. And we thought it'd be fun for people to kind of like doodle or draw during this presentation. There's all kinds of amazing research that if you use your hands and do a combination of text and images and kind of like structural things while you're listening, that you'll remember more. Now, remembering every word I say may not be your ultimate goal, and I get that. But I wanted to show you something. This is the sketch note that I made for my talk today. So it was done down and dirty. And I have notes about don't forget. There it is right there, doodle and sketchnoting, right? And I always have to remember joy and collaboration. It's important for me not to get too crazy about this stuff. Another image I wanted to share was this image. This is a more accomplished, let me see, this is a more accomplished sketch note right here, which is, this is what I observed the wonderful teaching artist Ava Rondrut doing some teaching down at Ash School in the city. And often when I do observations, I love it. So it's just using things like trying to figure out what's going on and combination of sketches and writing and everything. So if anyone wants to know more about that, this is a process that's huge out there. If you Google sketchnoting, you'll find it. And I have done a couple of projects where I collect drawings. I did a project, it'll show up in the slideshow, where I had people listening to a concert at the Cultural Center at that amazing Preston Bradley Hall. Oh my God, don't we wish we could be there in that space right now? Oh my gosh. Which is an amazing space because you're surrounded by language, right? All those names of all those amazing thinkers. But they doodled on vellum during the concert, and then we collected the pages and I created a book. And so you can see the images bleeding through each other with transparency and everything. That was awesome.
So the process today that we're asking people to do is just sketch note or draw or write. And then Alice has a project, a Dropbox. I'm going to click on the link here and put it in the chat. If you want to join in on the process of doing that, you can Dropbox an image of your sketch note or your notes or whatever, and then she's going to take those and make them into a visual book-ish. It's going to be not a physical book, but a visual virtual book. So if you are welcome, you are more than welcome to do that, and we'll share that also, the link to that project on the Artist Bookhouse Facebook page and in next week's email. If you want to participate, that would be a lovely, lovely, lovely collaborative thing happening while we go through this process. But so let's back up again, and thank you for stopping me on that. I was too excited to hear about your.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So, I wanted to read a brief the very first poem in an amazing book of poetry by Gregory Orr, and the name of the book of poetry is Concerning the Book That Is the Body of the Beloved. And in thinking about books today, I realized that for an atheist, books are about as close to God as I get. right? There's something about bookmaking. Of course, there's so much tradition and so many traditions about religions about the book. But he's written this ecstatic book of poetry. I'm just going to read this first quick poem. The beloved is dead. Limbs and all the body's miraculous parts scattered across Egypt, stained with dark mud. We must find them, gather them together, bring them into a single place, as an anthologist might collect all the poems that matter into a single book, a book which is the body of the beloved, which is the world. So that's a poem that I love, that I've taught a lot.
Alice, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. We have a question on the chat from Cass. What is that poet's last name?
O-R-R.
O-R-R. So what's the first name of the poet?
Gregory Orr. Concerning the book that is the body of the beloved. It's amazing.
Lovely. That's gorgeous. Okay, so continue, please, ma'am.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to first talk, hopefully as quickly as I can, about my path, and then we'll talk about my bookmaking. I started as a poet, and I knew myself as a poet. I was in love with language, and then I kind of I started falling out of love with language, which might be a daggers into the heart for all of us book lovers here, and of course I adore books. But I got my MFA in writing at the School of the Art Institute, and during that process, I started doing a lot more visual work. And I realized that the silence that happens when I make and enjoy visual art was more important to me than the chatter inside my head and from books. So as a maker, I've started that migration from saying things to making things. I started having my poetry, when I made it, was much more about found language or borrowed language. So it wasn't my voice, it was other people's voices. So
translating other people's voices into something you were saying. That's exactly. So great. Yeah. So how did that shift for you? Where did that happen? And when?
I started doing visual work at the School of the Art Institute in the early aughts. And for my final project, I did a visual piece instead of a publication. But then I started painting, and my husband, Sean Decker, who I think is on the call, is a wonderful artist, and he got a lot of great gigs in artist colonies. So I spent a lot of time in Oxbow, etc. So I had the chance to immerse myself in art making. I found myself falling in love with it. Nice. I think for this story, so it's kind of like writing, painting, printmaking, which was like a big thing, and then how wonderful Beth has this print here. And then from there, most of my work now is in animation, making short films. So
visual narratives on a different scale or level. That's great.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Penland.
Yeah, Penland. Oh my gosh, Penland. So here, I'm gonna pull up my slideshow now.
Oh, great. Okay.
Because that's in there. Hold on. I think. Yeah. And then I'm going to share my screen. And yes, okay. So I think I'm gonna do it like this. Are you seeing that, Jamie? Are you all seeing the book?
Yeah. I'm just seeing your desktop thing. Did you share your whole thing or just that image? It's showing us a black screen with all of your.
Okay, got it. Okay, let me do that again.
Okay. I just want to remind everyone who's listening, if you could keep your microphone muted so that we don't have any ambient noise that takes out of the speaker view, because we are recording these and we are going to place them on our YouTube. So it helps us edit if you just have Alice's face and work. So thank you for muting. And if you have a question or comment, again, please use the chat box and we will get to those as we move through this process. Okay, Alice?
Are you seeing it now?
Yes, it's the lovely red and green beautifulness.
Yes. Let me see. I thought that, let me see. Hold on a second. Oh, I know what I need to do. I need to do this and have you share it. Oh, one quick second. We are all learning how to Zoom, aren't we? Okay, so I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this, share screen, and this time I'm doing the Finder. Are you seeing that?
Yes, there's one image right now, still the orange or the red and beautiful one. So is that going to take us to every image?
I think, yep, it is.
Oh, yay. Okay, perfect.
Yay. Yeah, I figured
All
out. Okay,
I'm going to mute so you can go.
So in Penland, which is this amazing artist colony in North Carolina, I've been there twice. And the first time I went there, we started the whole residency by making a book. And so that idea of a book is a process piece. A book is something that you make with loving care and with your hands. And then having made that, you're invested in it, and your whole work in a project changes, has been transformative to me, both in terms of art making and trips and everything. So we did everything from incorporating lots of different materials, stitching, collage. Right there you see the recipe for paste paint, right? So how to make this wonderful stuff. So that book was really important to me. And the idea that a book can hold everything from comments to notes to art making to mystery to ornament was really important. So I also went to Penland and made paper. This is the book I was talking about, the book where it was pieces of vellum collected. So these are sketches done by participants sitting in Preston Bradley Hall. And you can see the wonderful thing. I especially love the one on the right. You can see about how the portrait of the people in the audience is backlit, in essence, by this picture, by the chandelier, by that wonderful architectural detail. So I love what happens in layering. That's why I love printmaking. That's why I love working in After Effects and digital media, because the power to overlap and combine images is extraordinary. Then the next thing I wanted to show you is a part of my studio practice, which is in essence a kind of a loose leaf book, which is reminders to myself. So I've come up with prompts, things that I keep telling myself that I said I'm going to write them down, and so I put them into a deck, like a deck of cards, and I shuffle them. And when I get stuck, I shuffle them. So I often need to be less serious. I often need to impose order, or think about scale, or make things wilder, or add something, or add elegance, which is elusive. So that's a kind of a loose leaf deck of cards book that I've used in my practice a lot. At Penland, I made all kinds of wonderful papers. The emphasis the summer I went was on pulp painting, but we made both kind of Eastern and Western style papers and a lot of different textures. And once again, playing with everything from very loose decal edges, cutouts, use of different materials. Yeah, let me linger on that image for a minute. And as you know, for the bookmaking aficionados in the group, I'm a very simple bookmaker. I almost always just use simple pamphlet stitches. My emphasis is on the content and what kind of happens across the gutter and across the pages. Something in my practice that I'm really working hard on is humor, which is the most god-awful, hardest thing in the world to do. And this is my closest example to anything approaching humor. This is my August to-do list, and it's empty. So I basically took failed prints, which is a wonderful thing to do with books, is to take pieces of art that you're not quite happy with and to cut them up and sequence them. So that was my August to-do list. I've become really fond of nonverbal, wordless books. So a lot of my books have become documents of trips, or I also take them into museums, and I've found that prolonged sketching in museums is a wonderful thing to do. I mean, I made friends with a lot of docents. But these 2 pages are kind of looking at, I have 2 kind of strategies in my big painted books. One is to kind of take the whole spread as a canvas and spread the image across it. So this was sitting down at our dock in Maine. And the little caption there is Greyhawk reimagined as the goddess of the dawn, Harborfield's dock. She is not that color. As may or may not have been evident in my paintings that I showed my front studio, I love changing colors. And then this is an example of where I've used the 2 parts of the page to talk to each other. This is the same trip, I think. The harbor without us and the harbor with us, kind of contrasting the ways, you know, that. So I find both things great. I find there's something kind of majestic and startling about using the whole spread. And there's something really conceptually interesting, to me at least, about taking the 2 sides as a counterpoint or a conversation, kind of across the fold. Here's a small book that I wanted to share. The strange little things I say in my books. Nothing was the same after she opened. This was a Santa Fe trip, where often I combine observational drawing, the iron ornament, with kind of odd little self-portraits.
Alice, is this paper that you made at Penland and took on the trip, or is this paper that you made while you were on the trip?
I think I took this with me. Okay. I almost always prepare the books, the little books, before I go, and usually with a durable cover that will hold up fairly well. And this is another example. If my sister's still in on the call, this was from her place in Santa Fe. This is an example where I spread the drawing across the fold.
This one kind of reminds me of what you were doing now, where you're doing the images outside your window of the studio.
Yeah, really.
I want to revisit that in a minute when we talk about what you're doing during this time. Go ahead.
And then this was Mark Toby's is amazing artist used texts. So this was a kind of me being frustrated about how I couldn't do what he was doing, but then doing it in an image which made me happy. So it's taking frustration and turning it into something that works for me, which I do a lot because I'm often frustrated. So I have to keep on transforming those frustrations into something. And then it's so funny because I think I made this piece before I read the Gregory Orr book, When is a Body a Book? And this is paper, very fragile, that I made at Penland, which has mica in it. So that's kind of wonderful. I used a bunch of different techniques here, including, I went through a phase where I was fascinated with letraset. There's old press-on letters, and I managed to have this huge big store of them, so I love those rub-on letters. So I often try to get a variety of ways of representing text. You can see there's handwritten letraset and typed and printed. I've done accordion books and I love them. This was, I think, was an example of that I used when teaching. What I love about concertina or accordion books is the way the 2 sides can talk to each other. So this side was when I listen with my heart, and this is when I listen with my ears. So kind of like, I love the way, because I do love dichotomies and the friction of differences. And so I love the way books and book structures can make that happen. This is a big spread from I think I took this on a trip. And then this was another meditation on solitude, which I think a lot about. I think we're all thinking a lot about. I heard that it was amazing talk on being Krista Tippett's about making friends with solitude. So I think we're all trying to find peace with being alone. That's another image from there where I was trying to do very different things on different pages. Such a Spring of Storms. This was a kind of the watercolor piece, and another painting. I've drawn my left hand too many times. And then this is another example of just a little stamp binding book that uses handmade paper. And this is an example of a book where I tried to do two different things on the 2 pages. I called it a text and image improv, because when I do these books, I almost always, what I do is I set up the book, I bind and make the book, and then in some ways I respond to the materials, because in this book, I had these very evocative handmade papers, and as you'll see, papers with insets into them, like here. So there I started a story. Once upon a time, a thread which almost never untangled itself was captured between 2 windows, and thus began a story of woe and wonder. And then the next page was that. So because I'd done up some pages where I'd embedded thread into the, so just to point out the obvious, I would never have written that idea about a thread without, so I'm responding to the image. So I'm responding to the material. And the same thing here.
So we have a comment in the chat. Rebecca says she loves that. And I also wanted to ask a quick question to you. You've talked a little bit about how the pages talk to one another and how you like to use the spread. And on this book in particular, I'm really moved by what you said about how you're switching from text and you're inspired by the materiality and what's going on. So as you move through the book, I know you're going to mention that, but it's just a lovely thought.
Yeah.
I just wanted to.
And one of my main themes I wanted to talk, is for me, it's not quite a dichotomy. It's not as if it's one or the other, but to oversimplify, sometimes I start with an idea of what I want to make, but then often I start by making stuff and seeing what it tells me, right? And I found that in general, the responding to materials part leads me to more interesting, surprising work.
Does that happen when you are taking apart? You said something also that struck me about failed prints and utilizing those materials. Does that happen in the same way as it's happening in this book?
Absolutely. The power of cropping is amazing. It's amazing how you think you've made something and then you start cutting it up and it reveals itself in a new way. So that kind of iterative back and forth. And I think one of my, I've got many flaws as an artist, including messiness and impatience. But I think the not being afraid to destroy things, and not being in painting, covering up, the not being too afraid or precious with stuff has served me well. So
I love that. Yeah, let's see the rest of this book. I love this.
Well, I think that's all I had. That's all I had.
Okay.
That was it.
Okay, next book. Move on.
I've got two big books. This is a journal book, and this was the summer after my father died, which is a little less than 4 years ago. And so there I am. Okay, so I went to Crete, and cried and swam in warm, heating water, and drew in what I could. And then I don't even remember how I made this image, but I love it. I think I might have drawn on the plane. I don't even know where I found that phrase. If anyone knows over that, I think the floating world is a Japanese term, but so I made that. And then in going through my books, this is a page I found that I really loved. There's a lot of pages I didn't. A quick sketch on one side, and then a poem, which I haven't written in a long time. Jamie, you're muted.
Sorry, I was just going to say, this is also where you're responding back and forth, and you've got this lovely deer repetition happening, which sort of responds to in my head, in my view, I'm seeing this as responding to those lovely rocks, that
Right.
repetition of image.
Absolutely, the kind of a visual rhyme, right? And this one, dear cave, dear surf, dear stone, dear shepherd's hut, dear jasmine and oleander, dear feta and olives, dear salt and sacrifice, dear lintel and oracle, dear origin and ending, dear strategy of tears, dear sunrise of surprise, dear Crete, dear dead father, dear endangered loved ones, oh so many beloveds, dear here and then, dear now, accept this offering.
That is actually also quite moving right now in the time that we're in, because we're thinking these thoughts, but it's also, somebody had said the other day that they are focusing on yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So that last line to me is just gorgeous. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I'm going to mute myself again.
This was another drawing from Crete. This is a cover from a book. That image doesn't work very well, but the book was A Week with Emerson, because I love Emerson's essays and I find his quotes really wonderful. So this is they're mainly landscapes, and they were accompanied with quotes from Emerson. The quote here is, "I grieve that grief can teach me nothing, nor carry me one step into real nature." And then everything is made of one hidden stuff. This is the universe. Thus is the universe alive. All things are moral, which I found intriguing as hell. So that was that book. I just wanted to show these two pages back to back in homage to that wonderful place, Oxbow. If no one's ever been there, make paper or make books, it's a heavenly place. And this is a book I made there. And I find in life and in art that imitating things makes sense. I got on a roll of imitating different artists in this book. So that's kind of Oxbow, Ellsworth Kelly-like. And this is an abstraction, kind of Joan Mitchell, flowers. So I was kind of working on my painting chops to see what I could do differently. And this is from a different book. This is after I had foot surgery and I was trying to be patient. So that's my crutch.
That's great.
I think and then this is getting on into more recent images, which leads us to some stuff, which is that my father collected the whole Earth catalog, and I'm sure some of you have memories of that amazing thing before Google, before YouTube. And I love origami. I love folding paper. I've become really fond of these boat shapes. So I've been making boats out of these sheets, and I've been curling it and using it that way.
I love that. I love that tactile. You can feel the paper even if we're not feeling it right now, because everybody knows what that paper feels like.
And I covered it with many laborious series of matte medium to kind of protect it and stiffen it up.
Yeah, I love that.
I think these are my last two images. These are from one of my bigger books where I stitched and had some text. Yeah, so that's the end of that.
That every home has a scratch doorway. What is that? How did you put the text on that one? Was that rub letters or those press letters?
Yeah, that's letter set.
Oh
yeah.
My gosh, that is just so stunning. And I love how it sort of fades in and out with that background. So one of the things that I noticed, and I don't know if everybody else noticed, but your work is very tactile and very materially. You can feel it as you see it. Can you talk a little bit about how you work with that? You said you were messy and impatient, which I think has to do with using that tactileness and that visceral stuff. Yeah. It's not very...
if you can look like over at my workstations are amazingly messy. The good thing, and then here's like my setup here, because I use everything from acrylics to collage to oil to pastel. I have to have lots of materials around. But yes, I think when I get stuck, I go back to the materials, and I try to fall in love with some materiality, whether it's a color or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, and then also I wanted to ask you, actually, because you are a collaborator with materials, and you're also a collaborator with humans, and with text and language. How has that shifted since the lockdown? Because you're working essentially in your studio alone, but how have you shifted your ideas on collaboration?
Right. Well, yes, collaboration has been important to me for a long time. I've done collaborative writing with Cecilia Pinto. I'm lucky enough to have not one, but 3 musicians in my family. So I've done short films using music by Sean Decker and Sam Decker and my daughter, and Sally Decker, to name her, in case she's listening. But I've been doing a lot more collaboration recently. I had this. I'm so glad this is happening right now, because tomorrow was supposed to be, no, Saturday was supposed to be the opening of an amazing 2-play show at my studio and Lisa's at 1100 Florence, because I've been working with 8 collaborators. We call ourselves the 4 Hands Collaborative, where we do collaborations either 2-on-2 or 3-on-3. And we've been doing it over 6 or 9 months, and we've created an amazing body of work. And the artists are amazing, and I'm a little bit too flustered right now to name them all, so I don't want to name them because I forget somebody, but a lot of them are on the call.
That's okay. I just dropped your 4 Hands collaboration link on your website on the chat.
Right.
So.
And so what I did is that, what I've discovered, the collaboration is the bomb, right? Mainly it's because you don't have to do it all by yourself. Just the way I do, I've discovered making sequence and series is great, because it keeps me from thinking I have to make a masterpiece each time. So, because I have a big enough ego, I want to make a masterpiece each time. But if you're doing a bunch of them, you can say, that one's crap, and you eventually get to a good one. The great thing about collaboration is that you can afford to be incomplete. You don't have to round off the edges. You don't have to create something that can live by itself. You can create something that actually needs somebody else, which is an interesting, hard talent to know how to do that. So anyway, so I realized that I missed that. And so I started basically the online series, which is basically prompts. So the collaboration in that case is basically we're all responding to the same prompt. Sometimes you'd actually talk to a human, and it's been amazing. I've had like more than 100 images contributed by many of the people on this call. The current one is all about books. So the challenge is to come up with some kind of image about books and post it. And
I put that link as well, I think. Hold on, right. Did it go through? Yeah, I put that link on there as well. So if people are interested in doing that, can you talk a little bit about your idea of layering as well?
Sure.
Oh, and we have about 15 minutes left, so I want to be mindful of your time and as well as our participants' time.
Yeah.
So we'll switch back to that.
Very quickly about layering. I did it in poetry, where I mixed and the friction of having 2 things to come together. I was looking through one of my poems, and I often did what I call braiding poems, where I took like London following by the Clash, and I could write a book by Rodgers and Hart and combine the lyrics. So that idea of braiding and layering has always been there. Printmaking, of course, is all about that, about mats and stencils and everything. And then, so layers make sense. Layers yield to collaboration really well. I think that, Jamie, maybe we could segue into the new project, including playing that one little video real quickly.
Yeah, have at it. Are you sharing your screen again?
Yeah.
Is that the best way? All right. So Alice has been working with, like, as she mentioned before, with stop motion animation and other kinds of animation. So she's going to share with us one of her videos that has to do with a book and animation and video. Not animation, right? But I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, you'll see it in a minute. Hold a second. Let me see. Oh, let me see. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. Let me see. There it is. Okay, and then I'm going to share my screen. Share it. Okay, so that's the end. So I think the volume is on. Okay.
This is mine art painted. This is tape binding. This is a camera watching as I reach in and unravel what I did. This is one material resisting another. This is butcher paper beneath. This is during the time of COVID-19. This is 4 years almost since my father died, transformed by Alzheimer's, rolled, creased, blurred, bound. And the moment when the tape is finally unraveled and the mylar springs back into its rectangle, I wanted that moment to last longer so I could savor it. But it didn't work out that way.
So that's
so lovely.
And that piece was the first step actually in this collaboration that I want to share with you, which is that David Rubman, who I think is on the call, under Beth, let me see, I think, are you there? What would his be? I can't, anyway, I can't see if he's, I think he's there, but let me pull up, let me see. Now I want to do new book. Okay, so now I'm doing my Zoom, I'm doing my share screen, and I'm doing, okay, I think now I'm going to, are you seeing that, Jamie? Jamie, I can't hear you. Thelma, can you?
Muted, sorry. I'm muting so you're not hearing all of the background stuff at my house.
Are you seeing that? Are you seeing that sketch?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So David Rubman and I, who's a wonderful wood artist, decided to collaborate together. This is our first sketch. My idea was that he was going to do, this is after a conversation, he was going to make 3 curved panels of wood, and I was going to kind of create 3 booklets like that. And I thought, oh, I'll do 4 sections, earth, air, wind, and fire. That didn't work out. Then this was another side, this was the aerial view of it. So then he made these amazing 3 panels. And they came to me like this. He did this amazing thing with vacuum and bending, and there they were. I pierced them in the middle, and I tried to figure out what shape to use. That was my original idea, but as I started playing with it, I realized I like this shape better, where they're like on top of each other like a boat.
Yeah, that sort of reflects your other boat shape.
Yeah, I know. So I'm all into boats. And so what I did yesterday, and it took a god-awful amount of time, is I found some elastic thread, which is great, and I basically bound these 3 pieces of wood together with elastic. And by sewing them and binding, I did notches. If you can see, like up here, I notched little places in each of the things where the thread could catch. So I did this binding to create this structure. And that was an early version. I liked that one a lot, but then I didn't quite like, it was too something. That didn't quite work. So this is where I landed up. So this is how it looks right now. And those are painted, crimped, and curled pieces of mylar there. This is a Whole Earth catalog, looking like an octopus. This is some mulberry paper. You can see I've kind of slid pieces of the Whole Earth catalog underneath the stitching. And there's a detail, and I chose pages that are all about gardening and sailing. They made me really happy. And then I wrote something. Behold, a joyous golden wave swelling beneath us, even now, and even for the almost gone or very gone or about to be dead beloveds. The boat surfs so surely, the water is so kind.
Oh, that is lovely. So you said your first iteration you weren't happy with. How did you translate that first image of how when you bound these boards together and had the things inside to this one? What was that process?
It was basically, and for me, I'm like a complete, sculpture and 3D work is a new frontier for me. So I'm like, once again, responding to materials. I thought I knew what I wanted, but when I had these 3 gorgeous pieces of wood and I started balancing them and doing things with them, I realized that the shape where it's kind of balancing it's much, and there's some more things. I like that image in particular. For me, it became much more about surfing and the lake and this idea of something beneath that and for me, especially today in this horrible gray, should be beautiful spring day, this idea that somewhere beneath us is this golden wave waiting for us. It provides some solace or some happiness to me.
That is lovely. We have a couple comments. Susan and Martin, I'm assuming that's Martin, said the scale and tension of binding is exquisite. And then Jean says, such an amazing construction from someone who self-describes as a basic book structure person. So I think that it is true. You responded to what your collaborator made for you, and you adjusted your thing and just responded to the materiality of it. Can you tell me more about this elastic thread?
Yeah,
Why did you choose it? Why did you choose it in particular?
I'm going to show you a wonderful object. Here, I'm gonna stop sharing the screen, I think.
Okay.
So this is my mother-in-law's sewing box. And for anyone who knows these structures, they're like miraculous structures. I've never been a sewer, but they're like genie boxes, the way they open, And so she's got every kind of thread in here. So whenever I need sewing things, which isn't very often, I open this up and find this amazing, it's like, ta-da! And I found, because I started working with it, Jamie, and I did the test. I'm like, this has to hold a lot of tension, because my early efforts were like, am I nuts to think thread can hold this thing together? So I started like taking the thread I had and trying to pull it, and it kept breaking. So I'm like, I need something with give. I need something, and also because I knew I was gonna have to manipulate it. It wasn't like I was going to bind it and leave it. I had to bind it and then manipulate it, slide things under, add things. So I needed something with give. So I experimented with the elastic thread, and I think it's working. So
I love that. I'm so happy that, again, the materials made the thing for you. They make the thing. Alicia says, the idea of something soothing waiting for us beneath has soothed me, which I needed. So thank you for that. From everyone, I'm sure. We have about 5 more minutes. If anybody has any questions they want to drop in the chat for Alice, we can go through those. And I also want to remind everyone about the challenge number 7 of the collaboration is the beauty of the book. So she's gathering those, and I've put those on the chat right up above before we started the thing with the boats. But so there's 2, alicegeorge.org, alicegeorge.org. links up there on the chat. And I've also added the chat or in the thing, the Dropbox is up at the top for you to submit. I'll add that one again. Submit your sketch notes if you did those. I'll drop that in there as well. So if anybody has any questions for Alice to drop into the chat, that this would be a good time for that. Alice, I want to thank you so much for this. This was a lovely conversation and a lovely slideshow. And there were several things I didn't doodle, but I did write things down. One of the things that struck me in particular was something that you said, and I don't remember which context it was, about books holding mystery. That was something you said that made me think, oh, wow, that's great. And then working across the gutter, wordless prints, taking your frustration and making it work. So lovely. So I don't know if you want to have everybody hold up their sketch. Oh, what's she doing? She's doing something. Here she comes back. Oh, she's bringing back the book. Okay.
That would be great. I just wanted to show you, just in case, I mean, I think most of the people in this call are probably bookmakers, but if you're not, this is like a book I started and didn't finish, but just to show you that something I found really useful is preparing the page and laying down color. Once again, because, in other words, not starting from blankness, but basically creating a simple bound book that has some kind of information already there that you have to respond to. For me, that technique, it's so simple, but it's been really priceless. So
sort of like stopping your writer's block at the very beginning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. No questions have come up, but Dana says it's very inspiring. Thank you. And then Rebecca says blankness is such a hard place to begin. So that is something that we're all taking from this. So if everyone who participated in the sketchnote challenge for today, you can continue sketchnoting the rest of your day and then drop it into the Dropbox. And if anyone wants to participate with the book challenge this week, that would be great. I think those are due when, on Sunday?
Yeah, so Sunday at noon. And know that once this crisis is over, I facilitate everything from, I've done interdisciplinary critique groups. I call it Anti-Isolation Project. I've done this, this collaboration group. So if you want to either email me and make sure you get on my, that you're on my mailing list, or follow me on Facebook, and my Instagram handle is Alice is Working. So.
Hello, I hope you enjoyed Evanston Bound with Alice George. If you would like to view more of her work, please visit her website at alicegeorge.org. And if you're interested in learning more about Artist Bookhouse, please visit us at artistbookhouse.org. Please consider a donation by clicking the Donate tab. And if you're interested in more of our Evanston Bound videos, please watch them here on YouTube. My name is Jamie Tomey. Thank you.